Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Okay, let's welcome our speaker tonight, who is Joe H.
My name's Joe. I'm an alcoholic. It's good to be here. I want to thank Beverly for sharing. It was nice, very nice. I'm still stuck, though, back on which drug it was that she took that caused an entire metamorphosis. I'm going to have to ask her that afterwards. I found some good shit out there, but I never found one that actually did that. But the program of Alcoholics Anonymous has caused that in my life. Welcome to the new people. Be careful that your 30, 60, or 90 days or 6 months is not an accomplishment. It's a miracle. The best way to miss miracles is to take the credit and turn them into accomplishments. Then you miss the miracle. And there's a lot of stuff in AA that'll pump up your ego rather than deflate it. You got to be careful. You're not going to cause either one from happening or not, but be careful. If I could smash my own ego, I would be doing a lot better after 21 years. If I could surrender, I would have a long time ago. If I could work on my character defects, I wouldn't be here tonight. I'd be home in a state of perfection. And I mean, I wouldn't have gone for some of them. I would have just gone for all. I'm all or nothing, all or nothing. And if you can just not drink no matter what, you might want to consider if you're in the right place, because I drink no matter what. Alcoholics drink no matter what, except by the grace of God. Sometimes they leave something out because they got a little concerned about scaring the new people over time. You can even see that in the original How It Works before they sent it around. I love the original manuscript of How It Works. My favorite one is after the ABCs. It says, if you're not convinced of these 3 pertinent ideas, you might want to reread the book to this point or else just throw it away. Strong language. Strong language worked for me. And so does love. And I don't know why the two can't exist in the same place. If you care whether alcoholics live or die. Now, if you care to be popular, you could tell Beverly was not consumed with that, nor am I. If you care to be popular, you know, do everything you can to be popular. I was always told if you meet someone everybody likes, be really careful. They told my sponsor when he got out of the Colorado State Penitentiary, his parole officer told him, if you ever want to see your children, before I ever let you see your children, I'm going to wait till I meet someone who doesn't like you, because you're a con man and everybody likes you. And when he met somebody that didn't like Don, they let him see his kids. You never know what works here. You got to use what the person has, the new person, the old person, someone in between. I was about 10 years sober, and I found that I didn't really care much about old-timers until I realized I wanted to be one, and that I hoped somebody would care about me when I was sober for a while. What does that mean, though, for an alcoholic? That means, do you care enough to tell them the truth, or are you worried about their sensitive alcoholic feelings? Now, I learned a long time ago, in any room with more than one alcoholic, if you're concerned with how they're going to feel, you're going to go absolutely crazy, because how they feel is going to change every 5 or 10 minutes. Do you care whether they live or die? I've also learned over the years there's some things you should care about, and there's some things you should probably not care about. I just thought when I was new, I thought when I was new everything was black and white. I never thought there could be anything negative in helping somebody else. And over the years, I learned that a lot of people, and myself included, have used working with others to avoid looking at themselves and paid dear prices. How could there possibly be anything negative in something so positive? And I never thought there was anything positive in the negative. For example, how could selfishness or dishonesty or resentment or fear be helpful? My God, it's the stuff that brings me back to God over and over and over. Thank God for alcohol. I don't hate what alcohol did to me. It created a spiritual awakening. Created a spiritual awakening the first time I used it, and for many, many years, and the last time I used it. My first drink was very similar to my last drink. They didn't feel the same, but they were very similar. Some people don't have a spiritual awakening when they first start to drink, but at some point, if you're alcoholic, you're not going to hear somebody just describe, oh, it sounded nice, my friends were doing it, you know, I gave in to peer pressure. I didn't give in to peer pressure. I gave in to something much deeper within myself that was driving me to find something. Thank God I found alcohol. I realized in my first inventory that if I hadn't found alcohol at an early age, I probably would have killed myself, because there was this emptiness that was just hungry for something. I believe my drug and alcohol use was a spiritual search to fill a spiritual emptiness. She called it a malady. Our big book calls it a malady. The malady is not that my spirit is sick. How could something within yourself which is 100% pure be sick? The malady is that I'm shut off from it. I'm shut off from it by selfishness and dishonesty and self-seeking and fear and resentment, which I discovered was in full bloom before I ever took a drink. My first inventory, I saw it. My first drink was at age 12. But in my first inventory, I saw an 8, 9, 10-year-old kid who knew better than God Almighty how things should have been. My dad was 60 years old when I was born. He was 70 years old by the time I was 10. And in therapy, that used to cause a great deal of pain. Since I've woken up a little bit in Alcoholics Anonymous, it gives me a tremendous amount of hope for the future. Why? Because I'd like to be doing what my father was doing when I'm 60 years old. I have 9 more years to follow in his footsteps, at least. Right? My feelings for him changed from an amends at his grave. Don't ever let anybody tell you can't make amends to someone who's dead. 2 of my most powerful amends to the 2 of the closest people in my life were at grave sites. Powerful. And I've yet to really hear one at a grave site that wasn't a really powerful experience for someone. I'll be 21 years sober in a couple weeks, August 17th, and I'm very grateful for that. I'm very grateful for that because I know it's not an accomplishment. Take me past 30 days and I'm into a miracle. Never had 30 days in 18 years of drinking and using drugs. Never. And that was after 10 treatment centers and some time in the Michigan State Penitentiary. I could remember ever having 30 days. I remember a couple times having 28 days. Because I found something when I was young that filled that void. I had a spiritual awakening. You talk to an alcoholic who's clear on their drinking, and they're going to describe a spiritual awakening. They're going to describe finding some power. They're going to describe feeling different, separate, and out of place. And alcohol Isn't it interesting if you're new? Alcohol treats alcoholism. What's interesting? Now, it doesn't make any logical sense if you're a brain surgeon, but if you're an alcoholic, you understand it in your heart. We speak a language here that's not rational, because we're not rational people. It's not a minimalist view, because we're not average in any way, shape, or form. We're extremists. You're either a piece of shit or you're the greatest boyfriend in the world, one or the other. The ego wins either way. We hate to admit we're average. My ego hates mediocrity. My ego will settle for being a piece of shit. They told me my whole life anyway, right? But I was going to prove they were wrong. I was going to take over the world. Remember when their question matched your question? You have so much potential. Remember when they used to say that to you? You'd lay there in bed and you'd say, I sure do. I'm going to show them too. But remember when their when their question became the one that was underneath yours? What's wrong with me? Remember when they start, and the screwed up thing is they started to ask me what's wrong with you when I finally found something where there wasn't anything wrong anymore. When I found a solution, they started wondering what's wrong with you. I grew up halfway between Detroit and Chicago, and that's where a lot of my belief system came from, sort of halfway between Detroit and Chicago. It's a pretty mediocre belief system, but it's a nice place to be from, Battle Creek, Michigan. Well-off family, no alcoholism, no abuse, wasn't molested. So I kind of felt out of place when I got here because everybody else had these great excuses for why they turned out the way they did. And then I realized I had my own little if-only story, you know. And you don't hear that talked about a lot, and I know I'm not the only one. If there's one thing I've known in Alcoholics Anonymous since I got here is that I'm never alone. And thank God we're not all sick at the same time. When I'm sick, you're not, and I need you. When you're sick and I'm not, you need me. We've never been all sick at the same time, and I've never been alone here. But I did have to make up my little if-only story when I got here. You hear the yets. I haven't done that yet. Haven't done that yet. But I got this little if-only story that's still there, and it encompasses the lies that I'm still believing. See, I didn't get sober on the truth. I got sober when the lies ran out. There was nothing left. I can't tell the difference between the true and the false. Thank God, especially when you're new. Thank God this program is not easily figured out. I believe this. Everything in my life that ever made sense never worked. Because I graduate, I move on, I get a degree. The only thing in my life that never made sense is the only thing that's ever worked. Now there's a paradox. This still doesn't make sense to me. How in the world does sitting down with another alcoholic, we usually pick somebody who was much worse, right? How does sitting down with another alcoholic talking about being powerless over alcohol with an unmanageable life, your old ideas and some new ideas about God and some sort of a decision about the rest of your life run on your will or not, an inventory that still doesn't make sense to me even though it causes dramatic alterations in my thinking. I mean, I was a trained therapist, and you're going to convince me that putting some person's name on a piece of paper and what they did and how it affected me and then looking at my part is going to change my thinking, my being? And it does. And to see that fear is under every resentment, how I bring those things, selfishness and dishonesty and self-seeking and fear, into every relationship, reading that to another individual or a few individuals, asking something you're not really sure about yet to remove that stuff, and making a list of people you've hurt, and then going back to those people, could change your life. And it does, and it has, and it still does. I'm not a person that lost faith in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I still believe in all three parts: unity, recovery, and service. And that means I'm an active member in the 12 steps. One of the saddest things I've heard over the years from old-timers is, I've worked the steps. 1 through 9 are meant to be done once. Live the rest of your life in 10, 11, and 12. That has not worked for me. I'm not a type 3 alcoholic. I'm a type 4 alcoholic that needs to do type 4 work. It's very scary when a type 4 alcoholic talks to a type 2 alcoholic, because type 2 alcoholics don't have to do what type 4 alcoholics have to do. And if you think I made those types up, read the chapter to the wives. They describe 4 types. Type 1 may or may not even be alcoholic. Program's filled with them. Believe it or not, you'll find out. A lot of hard drinkers in AA that all they needed was a sufficiently strong reason, and everything's been hunky-dory ever since. Type 2 is getting in a little bit of trouble. Type 3 in a little more trouble. Type 4 is just... And it says that the type 4 alcoholic has a better chance at this program than the other 3 types, and that doesn't make any intellectual sense. But we understand that hope comes from hopelessness, not hopefulness. Hopefulness is always rooted in a plan that you've got of what you're going to do to keep yourself sober. I've tried to work in the field of treatment, 3 times sober. I was temporarily insane. And I learned the same lesson 3 times. You cannot tell the truth in treatment. I learned it in my first, after a year and a half. They love to get you when you're new and really excited. About a year and a half, you're on fire, and they just suck you dry. And then you're about 2 and a half, and you're just like, you wonder why, because you've been getting paid to share a message that nobody charged you for. Then I had to learn it again a couple years later. 20 years sober, I had to learn it again. I'm going to go work. Now, this time it's going to work because it's for one of my best friends at a ranch where you got him a captive audience for months, not just 28 days. And here was a typical story. There's a kid there, been in treatment 23 times, old deadhead. And I spent a lot of time with him talking about step 1, and he had an experience regardless of what I shared with him. What I shared with him confused him enough to have an experience rather than trying to figure out what I was sharing with him. That's all you got to do here. And he was having an experience for the first time in all these years with step 1. And they discussed it at the staff meeting. Isn't he doing a great job? He's finally getting the first step. And his counselor spoke up and said, now it's time to give him his relapse prevention plan. And I thought, does anyone else think this is insane? For the first time in his life, he saw he cannot prevent his next relapse, and then they give him a plan of what he's going to do to prevent his next relapse. You're either powerless over alcohol or you're not, and I didn't get it. I didn't get it. I didn't get it as a therapist. I became a therapist because I didn't find out the answer to that question as a patient. When you can't find the answer as a patient, maybe you'll find the answer as a therapist. And the answer to the question was, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? But when I was young, I finally found a solution, and then everybody else started saying, now what's wrong with you? I wanted to say, nothing's wrong. I'm feeling great. What's that slogan in AA? My worst day drunk is better than my best day sober? No. My worst day sober is better than my best day drunk. What a bunch of crap. I had some great days drinking. Alcohol works for alcoholics. It does something. It treats those manifestations of untreated alcoholism. The great description of untreated alcoholism in our big book is in the middle of page 52 in the chapter to the agnostic. I'm having trouble with personal relationships. You know why? Because I think they go on out here rather than in here. Personal relationships don't happen out here, or you would be the same with everybody. Personal relationships are a reflection of what's going on in here. The unmanageability is within, not out here. I thought when I was new I had to get everything out here in line before I could do anything in here. It's the other way around. It's an inside job. First things first. I think maybe that expression came from a biblical expression that put God before all things. We turn him into something else. One day at a time. Does anyone know anywhere in any of our literature where our founders referred to one day at a time as we don't drink one day at a time? No, they didn't. They talked about we live life one day at a time and we don't drink for good and all. It's a little overwhelming when you're new, but how come the success rate was better when they were stronger with new alcoholics? How come our success rate was 75% when they took you to recovery before you were allowed to go to a meeting? How come from the first edition to the second edition, in those years from 39 to 56 or 57, 300,000 books went out and 150,000 members recovered. One recovery for every 2 books. We've now published over 20 million copies of the big book, and there's still only 2 million people sober around the world. Our big book used to say on the paper cover, you know the paper cover that when you're new you throw away because you're more ashamed of being sober than you were of being drunk? Especially in a small town. You know, everybody in town knew you did horrendous, atrocious things all over town, and then you're ashamed to be sober, that a miracle has happened in your life. Tear the paper cover up. Put something over your big book, you know. That paper cover used to tell newcomers where the message of Alcoholics Anonymous is located. And on that paper cover, in one of those paragraphs, it used to say, page 1 through 164 is the AA message. Look at your 4th edition nowadays. Travesty. Horrible thing. Our General Service Conference gave one person permission to change that and the forward to the 4th edition, and she changed it. She died 6 months later. I don't think that has anything to do with it, but I do believe in karma. And they didn't reread it. That was their mistake. And that paper cover now says page 1 through 164 had been the foundation for many alcoholics. Can't even show a newcomer where the message is anymore. It's not easy to find the message nowadays. What's the message? You get really confused. Just don't drink no matter what, go to meetings. Boom. What if you're an alcoholic that not drinking and going to meetings doesn't treat your alcoholism? What if you're a type 4 alcoholic? Because I believe type 1 and 2 find everything they've ever wanted in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous by itself. Type 3 does 1 through 9.5, quits, never does any more. Type 4, they seem to have this ego that rebuilds. Dr. Harry Tiebout talked about it to us a long time ago. It's not part of AA's literature anymore. That's sad. You got to go through Hazelton or somebody who cares enough about that message, because his message was just as important for us that have been around as Dr. Silkworth and Carl Jung's message was for those that are new. Dr. Silkworth knew about the body. They gave him a chapter. But remember, it's only a doctor's opinion. He's not an alcoholic. He has never had that physical craving, and it should be an opinion. But does his opinion make sense to your experience? When you drink alcohol, do you crave more alcohol? Is it like an allergy? You eat strawberries, you get a rash. You drink alcohol, you get a craving for more alcohol. Either happens or it doesn't. If it doesn't happen, go somewhere that addresses your problem. A lot of Al-Anons hide out in AA. Not that they aren't welcome, but this is kind of their bar. If you understand the disease, they live on our energy, right? The energy of an alcoholic. They love it. I was almost married to one once in this program. Came to our AA group, though. 7 years in Alcoholics Anonymous. Our eyes met. We fell in love. She was 7 years in our program, started the work with the strongest woman in our group at the time, and found out she was an alcoholic. But from daddy to every boyfriend she ever had, she's a full-blown Al-Anon. She got so clear, she discovered a physical craving in her body that would take place off the energy of an alcoholic, let alone the mental obsession, let alone the spiritual malady that they usually blame on us. You got to take a lot of responsibility to discover your disease when you don't drink. And you do everything an alcoholic does. Lie, cheat, steal, cover up, deny. And they don't have any anesthetic except the energy that they get from us. I don't comprehend the disease and I love them, but geez. Should be a program for people who go after winners with the same zest that people go after losers. It's called life. So I didn't know what was wrong with me. I'm in the middle of this family where I shouldn't feel the way I feel. I don't know what's wrong with me. They're starting to wonder what's wrong with me, and they send me away. 9th grade, I went from Boone's Farm apple wine on the weekends with some friends to LSD 25 at a private school in Massachusetts where Timothy Leary's assistant was using the school as a front to make LSD. That's a psychic change. It wasn't quite a metamorphosis, but it was quite a change to go from Boone's Farm apple wine, age 12, to LSD 25. Not LS chicken like the stuff they make nowadays, LSD on a sugar cube. It wasn't even a drug yet. And I was lucky to be one of the 2 students that this teacher turned on in the 8 years that he worked there. And it raised my consciousness to a very high level. Where after a few years of that, I had to shoot heroin for a long period of time just to come down from all the LSD I'd done. That's how far it raised my consciousness. It was shocking. It was just shocking. Loved New York, loved Boston, and by 19 they put me in the Michigan State Penitentiary. Of course, it was my fault, and that'll be the first ex-con you've ever heard admit that, because I'm not an ex-con anymore. I'm just a man who's been to prison. You know ex-cons in the program. They still look like they're in the joint. You can see them at the coffee break. You can see that wall. It's not toughness, it's fear. And thank God some people in AA knew that. The man that I met that became my sponsor got sober in death row. He then became the director of the Department of Corrections for the state he was locked up in 30 years later in Colorado. Amazing guy. And the miracle of AA happened the first time I heard him speak. I met someone who was like me, but he wasn't anymore. And I think that's when the magic happens. We all met people who were like us, and if that was enough, the county jail would have worked for many of you the first time you ever went, if all you needed were people with the same problem. We don't need people with just the same problem. We need people with the same problem and a solution. And the first time I heard Don, I heard a man who had been like me, and he wasn't anymore. But he scared me. Not because he told my story. He told my story, and I was like, wow, someone who really felt like I did as a kid. What's wrong with me? Who did a lot of drugs, who went to the penitentiary, who came to AA, who still didn't know the answer to that question. What's wrong with me? Am I an addict? Am I an alcoholic? Am I both? Are they the same? I found out they're not. There's just a lot of people selling the idea that they are. Simple question. If drug addiction and alcohol are the same, how come there's alkies in this room that could take or leave drugs? And how come there's drug addicts all around us who could take or leave alcohol? They don't react to alcohol like we do. They might be powerless over where it takes them. Take a drink, go get some crack. Alcoholic doesn't understand that. Takes a drink, got to have another drink. Heroin addicts, they take their drug, craving goes away. We take our drug, craving gets stronger. Lots of differences. But some people are both. Double losers. People with... We always have to put a great title on it, like those of us in AA are the chosen ones. I think of everyone with alcoholism, we're the ones that still have to pay our ticket. The ones that are gone are the ones that got to get free. Chuck C. used to talk about that. We're the ones that haven't quite paid our ticket yet for the train. Yeah, we'll interpret it as the chosen. There's a story about that. Guy goes to heaven, reaches the pearly gates. He's from our program. He's looking for the big meeting in the sky. I think by the time you get to that point, everyone's kind of going to be together up there, right? He gets up there, and whoever it is showing him around, there's a covered tent over here. He said, who are those people? Those are the Baptists. A picnic, party. Who are those people? Those are the Catholics. Guilt, suffering. Who are those people over there? Those are the Jews, Christians. Then they get to this place where there's a huge covered tent you can't even see in. He said, who are those people? He said, those are AA members, think they're the only ones up here. The chosen ones, right? Beverly reminded me of a story. It goes like this. I had a personal meeting with God the other day, and she was beautiful, and she was black. And I asked her how she was, and she started to cry. And she said, no one ever asked me that anymore. And I said, well, why are you crying? She says, well, I don't know if people care about me anymore. Oh, there's rappers and sports figures who thank me once in a while, but nobody else ever thanks me anymore. And I thought that was a great story. I got a lot of old ideas about God. I want to put a name on it, put it in a box, and make it the only one. That's been man's problem throughout history. I go to this talk, this guy says, come here, this guy. I should probably tell you, I spent 5 years of my first 5 years of sobriety in Denver, Colorado. I was moved out here to Santa Monica for 10 years. Didn't really want to. I was comfortable. And I thank God every day that on a regular basis throughout these 21 years, I have not settled for comfort. Because I could very easily join that church. And it's a dangerous church. It's a dangerous church by its own nature because it's comfortable. You got to risk painstaking. What do they mean when they say painstaking about this phase of your development? I don't know what staking means to you, but to me it means a gamble. I'm going to gamble the pain. I'm going to risk. I'm going to take a risk. Take a risk to make a fool out of myself. Take a risk to say stuff people might not like. Take a risk to suffer a little bit to get on the other side rather than always going around it. You just keep finding ways to go around it so you can stay comfortable. They even have terms nowadays. Imagine if Bill Wilson would have heard the term, you're interfering with my comfort zone. Right? Really wish you hadn't worded it that way in the book, Bill, because it kind of infringes on my comfort. Comfort's a dangerous drug. It's really what we wanted from our drinking. The book even says if you don't find the same ease and comfort you used to get from drinking, there's very little hope for your recovery. But it should also say, and if you settle, and they should have said, and some ease and comfort would be a big deal for some of us. But it should also say, don't settle for that ease and comfort because it can become the next trap around your neck that you're going to hang yourself with. So I was comfortable in Denver for 5 years, sponsor down the street, got a little commitment on the state committee for AA, working with people, loved Denver, had some great friends. And then I came out here I made the mistake of coming out here to make amends for some harm I'd caused to a woman I was engaged to. And this woman is in our program. And I called her and asked her, could I come over? She said, I'm not sure. Men's aren't comfortable. You want to stay comfortable, don't go out and start making amends. Don't write 4-column inventory. Write inventory where it was all their fault, and they're the ones that made you feel the way you did. Go back to them in amends, do what your therapist does. Tell them how they made you feel when they did whatever it was they did to you and think you're going to get free. No, you might stay numb. Some people confuse comfort with numbness. But I made the mistake coming out here, I called her up, can I come see you? Not sure. She said, but call me tomorrow. She had enough program to say, but give me a call tomorrow. Gave her a call. She said, well, I called your sponsor, and I called my sponsor, and we've agreed for you to come over on my terms and on my turf. Be at my mother's house tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. Went there, talked about the harm that I was clear on, looked at the clock, it was 6:30 p.m., and I made another mistake. If I would have liked to have stayed comfortable, I risked the comfort and I said, is there anything else I ever did that hurt you? When she was done, it was 9:45. But something started to happen in the room. And I said, now that we've got it all on the table, I'm a very insensitive person, as you know. She said, you're exactly right. Do you need to tell me how any of that hurt you? I've had amends I thought were big deal. The guy goes, what was your name again? I've had some I thought were no big deal, and the person said, you really hurt me. So I might know what I did, but I don't know how that hurts people. And I said, do you need to talk to me about how any of that hurt you? And when she was done, it was 12:45 p.m. or a.m. And something really had happened from feeling it in the room, the tension, the guilt, the shame. Something shifted in that room when she got to talk about how that hurt her. And then I asked a magical question that I've never really believed could ever be lived up to. And I know it can't, but it has, by something much more powerful than me. I said, is there anything I could do to make that right? And she said, be here in Los Angeles twice a month. We're going to go to therapy, see if we can work this out, or at least end it in a healthy way, because neither one of us have ever ended a relationship in a healthy way. And you know what came out of my mouth? I'll find a way to be here. The next day, a woman who didn't even know why I was here, thought I was just visiting, because I had been for a while, said, you ought to go look at this apartment down on Nielsen Way in Santa Monica. I lived in an apartment down there on the beach for $500 a month for 10 years. Rent control. That apartment now is $2,400 a month. I left just in time. Didn't choose to leave there. I could have stayed really comfortable in that apartment with the income I had and the friends and the reputation. I'd become somebody in AA, very dangerous. Had to hit bottom with self-indulgence, but I picked a great city to hit bottom with self-indulgence in. God is divinely inspired. I'm not. And at 15 years of sobriety, after being here for 10 years, I was moved to northern India, where I thought I would spend a few months. Not Indiana. My grand sponsor's from Indianapolis, and he called me one day before I moved to India, as I was being moved to India, and he said, Joe, you know, you got to be really careful with intuition. All you got to do is be off by one letter. Maybe God's saying to you, go to Indiana. He's the same guy that called me once. He said, Joe, I got a story for you. I don't like it when my grand sponsor calls, frankly, but I like the guy. I don't always like the message. And sometimes I think the message is the person. And you say something in your message I don't like you. It doesn't have nothing to do with you. Probably has something to do with something much more powerful than you. He calls me one day and said, hi, Joe, this is Gary. He said, you know, I got this buddy. We buy lottery tickets together every week. And I went with him the other day, and my friend Charlie said, I'm not buying lottery tickets anymore, Gary. And Gary said, how come? And his friend said, because I saw that all I want is enough money so I don't have to trust God anymore. See ya. And it's one of those where it takes about a week, and then it's like a delayed right cross to the chin. It gets you about a week later, you're like, ooh, that message was for me. I heard a guy today, he said, if something bugs you, that's probably because the bugs are in you. One of the wisest things I ever heard about alcoholic insanity A lot of people think alcoholic insanity is doing crazy stuff when you're drunk. It's not. Some people stay home, don't get in trouble, don't go to treatment, don't go to jail. They're just as much alcoholic as you and I. So what's the common denominator? And I heard a guy say it once better than anyone I ever heard say. He said, I never took the first drink drunk. That's the insanity of alcoholism, picking up the first drink. And I do that at my very best, further away from alcohol than I'd ever been. 28 days out of the Michigan State Penitentiary, reminded by my parole officer of what would happen if I broke parole, and my parole was ridiculous for somebody like me. I could never have lived up to it. Can't go to bars, you can't take drugs, you can't hang out with ex-felons, and you can't leave Calhoun County. That's like telling me, take a deep breath and don't exhale anymore. Don't breathe anymore. That's what I do. I take drugs, I drink alcohol, I hang out with ex-felons, and I go to Detroit or Chicago. He's telling me to hang out and battle. That state of consciousness was intolerable to me before I was 13 years old, and they're asking me to live that way again because they don't understand that the state of consciousness that I hate more than any state of consciousness is sobriety, untreated sobriety. My life history proves it. I will do anything at any cost to myself or anyone around me to get out of that state of consciousness, which is sobriety. You come here and you're new and they say, sobriety is wonderful. I'm 30 days sober and I'm so grateful to be sober, and you're sitting there dying of untreated alcoholism, wondering if maybe you don't belong in the last place you knew to go. And that's sad for an alcoholic when our message gets watered down to the point where real alcoholics feel out of place in Alcoholics Anonymous, or where somebody, I've had a home group down the street here in Santa Monica, Tuesday nights, where all they really want to do is try to do what's in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, have some become zealots? Yes. Have I had my periods filled with judgment about the fellowship? Yes. But I've seen it all over the country, and I've seen no matter how the message is presented, I've seen people that can present the 12 steps in a very loving, compassionate way, criticized and condemned by people in the program where all they're trying to do is what's in our book that the name of the program came from. Why? Because type 1s don't like to hear type 4. I heard a guy the other day, he said, just don't drink no matter what is a hard drinker's solution to an alcoholic problem. And I understand that, because hard drinkers can do that, given a sufficient reason. My dad was a classic hard drinker. I knew him from age 60 to age 81 till I was 21. Never saw the man without a glass of Chivas Regal. Didn't interfere with his life, didn't interfere with his career. He retired, he was successful. Went to the doctor one day. Doctor said, if you don't quit drinking Chivas Regal, it's going to kill you. Just with that reason, never had a drink the rest of his life, last 12 years of his life. If I went to the doctor, or if one of us go to the doctor, and they say alcohol's killing you, you run out of the office, you got to go have a drink because it's so damn depressing what he just told you. Right? The delusion that we are like other people, and I thought when I first read that, the delusion that we are like other people meant, when drinking. But it says, or presently like other people. You see, I want to think I'm like other people sober, but I just stayed with some people. I'm 21 years sober. I just stayed with 2 normies for 2 months. Never have lived with, I've had normal friends, but I've never lived 24/7 with, and this was a normal couple. And it was absolutely overwhelming, these people, what they can do. It's like there's nothing to grab onto. They just make up their mind to do something and they just do it. There's no drama about it. There's no lack of power. They don't have to go out and do all these gyrations and make amends to it. I heard 2 women at a restaurant the other day, and one says to the other, isn't it nice that we get together several times a year to just clear the air so we can remain great friends? And I think to myself, I have to sit down with someone, and I have to go through this and write inventory and see my part and read it to somebody, just to have the dignity to go to a friend and say, anything we need to clear the air about? I'm not like other people presently, nor do I really think I want to be. My name has already occurred, Average Joe, right? Plain old Joe, right? I set out to prove that to the world, not only drinking, I set out to prove that to the world in Alcoholics Anonymous. You think the only beliefs I brought here to AA were about drinking and what's wrong with me? God, I brought severe... I mean, the better you get, the more chapter 5, the first paragraph describes you. The first time I read it, grave emotional and mental disorders, those people are constitutionally incapable of being... That's not me. That's those poor people in AA that aren't going to make it. And I'm glad their chances are less than average. They have a chance, but it's not me. And then you do a little work in the first step and a little more work, and you see you have a grave mental problem, let alone your emotional problems that are just like you could be anything at any given moment. We don't have personality disorders. We're just well trained to follow our emotions, right? And all of a sudden how it works was describing me, but it said, your chances are less than average. Even if I had gotten here a little more well-adjusted, my chances were less than average. But there is one who has all power. Right? And those that do not recover are people who don't completely give themselves to this simple program. Somebody introduces themselves as a recovered alcoholic. You say, that's impossible. What does he think? He's cured? On the first page of the first forward to the first edition of the first printing of our big book, that was the promise they gave us, that you can recover. It doesn't mean cured. It's a daily thing. It's not contingent on my great work. It's contingent on the grace of God continuing in my life, and I can't control that either. That was a big piece of my last inventory, 20 years sober. I can't control grace. Damn it. The guy who heard this fifth step said to me, you know, there's only one thing God's clear. There's only one difference between you and God. And I said, what? He said, God's really clear that he's not you. But I'm not really clear that I'm not him. And as soon as I put a word on it, as soon as I give it a name, it becomes my own religion. It becomes my own fundamental religion. I don't care if it's Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism. I've looked at them all. And as soon as I put a name on it, that means 1/4 of the box has been created, and then by the time I'm done with the box, it's the only God, and if you haven't found him, you're screwed. It's the only way, and it becomes a fundamental, rigid, dogmatic religion in Alcoholics Anonymous. I used to speak sometimes and people would say, I felt like you were telling us it was the only way. No. What I've had to do is not the only way anymore. I don't know where the message is anymore. You got to find it. You got to find your own experience. But it all has to do with what's at stake. If you drinking again is going to mean you're going to lose a relationship, get some great relationship skills while you're here. Maybe you got a chance. If what's at stake here for you is a bad week and you'll just get yourself back to a meeting, then find a way to just not drink no matter what. But if your life's on the line and you're a type 4 alcoholic who's run out of, you're done with step 0, because if there's a first step, there's a step 0. Step 0 is when you're eliminating all your alternatives till you get down to 2, and then you'll find out you don't even have those 2. To die an alcoholic death or live on a spiritual basis, I couldn't even do well at those. I am not successful at dying an alcoholic death, nor is anybody in this room, yet. And living on a spiritual basis, if I could make that go the way I would like, I'd be in India, you'd be coming to my ashram to visit me. So just when I thought I had 2 alternatives, they pull the rug out from you under and you see you're powerless over either one of those. And when you've run out of options, when you've run out of alternatives, you're a type 4 alcoholic, you got a better chance at this program than anybody else. Thanks, Kevin.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone or through this Android phone through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.